Hey guys, thanks for coming.
Yeah, here we are.
Yep.
Appreciate it. So your great new record, it's called "We Can Do Anything." What is it that you guys wanted to do?
Make an album. That was it. So that was kind of the idea with it, is that we is a little bit of a, I don't know, like it should be fairly simple to be able to record and put a few songs together, and particularly when there's people that might be interested in hearing it. But it took us, I guess, about 16 years to be able to figure out a way that we would do it. So it was kind of, it's like something relatively easy that for us was almost impossible. So we can do anything.
What did you, after it was quite a while, did you have any sort of game plan going in? Did you want to revisit your sound? I mean, what was the thought when you went into the studio?
Well, it was interesting because before we made this album, we made an EP, which we made in one day. So that was really fast, spontaneous. We didn't even know the songs. Really, Gordon played us the songs in the studio, and then we just played it like a jazz band or a folk band or like a blues band, not so much like a pop structured kind of meticulously crafted piece of work. And that's actually, I believe, what people want from us. We've got that honesty and we've got that direct approach that seems to be getting rarer and rarer.
So as you mentioned, it's been quite some time between records. So what were you guys up to, if I could ask? What were you doing for 15 or 16 years?
Well, we were doing separate things, but always involved with music. Always, we were discussing things of the violin and fiddle world before coming up here, and I figured out how to play it a little bit, and played with a lot of different people, and so just always working on music. Did an album called Under the Sun with the Ryans, so it's Gordon Gale and the Ryans, and that was something I was real proud of, and lots of various projects, just none of them called Violent Femmes. And
well, that's not exactly because we hadn't made a record for about 6 or 7 years, and then we split up also for about 7 years. So we were already in an unproductive phase of the band's trajectory when the band had split up, which is very unproductive. And we got back together to play at Coachella, and it was going to be a one-off, but then Gordon and I both liked it. I mean, the music's always great, and the audience is always very inspiring to play for, and we also saw that we could still hold our own in the music scene. So then the question is, do we want to just resume this kind of static phase where we're just going around playing the old material exclusively? And we both came around to the idea of actually trying to make some recordings. And it wasn't until after we made them that I realized how debilitating that other stagnant phase had been. So it felt really good to make the EP, follow it up with this, and hopefully we'll continue to do that. And one of the reasons is, like Gordon said earlier, it's very difficult for us to make a record, but we found now that recording really fast is pretty easy and it's fun. So it seems like almost like the more work you put into it, the more difficult it is exponentially, but the results are not necessarily any better than if you just go in there and play spontaneously.
That's a little bit of a way of saying we really can't rehearse. We just can't do it. Cannot. I mean, I think we both rehearse fine with other people and other projects, but when we come together, yeah. And oftentimes it doesn't actually make it better, or at least it doesn't with us. So there's really, it's kind of like it really isn't the best way for us to be doing things.
And this goes back to the beginning of the band. When we started, Gordon had just graduated from high school, so that means it's summer in Milwaukee. And we did try this thing, rehearsing. We tried to do it in the basement, and it was like we just see this sun peeking through the cracks of the windows in the basement. And finally we said, let's just go play. Let's go play on the street. So we actually went out and played on the street a lot. And I don't know if that's rehearsing, but it was just playing. And as a result of not wanting to rehearse and wanting to perform instead, that was when we were discovered by the Pretenders, and they threw us up on the stage with them. And that pretty much, it didn't really actually do anything for us career-wise, but it did give us a lot of confidence. So even back in the earliest days of the band, we did not like rehearsing.
Playing 3 or 4 chords shouldn't be that tough, should it?
Nope. And it ain't.
Brian, you moved to Australia. I thought that was sort of intriguing. Tasmania. What precipitated that?
Well, we started touring in Australia back in 1984, and I always felt like it was a great country and would be a really good place to live. But there were, the band was going, family stuff keeping me in the States. But the last time the Femmes toured in 2005, I believe, and we toured there again in 2007 when I was already a permanent resident. But in 2005, my wife, Varuni, and I, we just said, hey, this is where we belong. We should move here. So we contacted a lawyer, and there's a special visa that they give only to artists and sports people called Distinguished Talent Visa, and the band Midnight Oil sponsored me or nominated me for that visa. And because of their prominence, and also because a long history of the Femmes, and we have a lot of Australian musical friends, and we've toured there a lot, so they thought that I would be an asset to the country.
I mean, I'd almost do it just to get something called a Distinguished Talent Visa. That's that
They
sounds
don't give it
really
to
special.
everybody, and that was just for my sports stuff, It's like, but I've been mainly playing music down there.
Was there a lot of music to choose from for this record? I mean, did you have like a lot of songs built up, and if so, how did you go about sorting that out? And was there thematic continuity or just good songs?
I didn't think thematically, and I tend not to think that way at all. I usually just think song by song, and but I took the opportunity to go through. I had for decades put every song and musical idea on a cassette tape. So I had these, I kind of got most of them assembled in one gigantic bag of cassette tapes. And I know they're not going to last forever. and maybe, so I took on the project of getting them all into the digital world. And then that process, there was just, hundreds of hours and songs and musical ideas. So listening as it went down, but also remembering things and then having forgotten a lot. So it was this big project, and then there would be some songs that stood out that I thought this would be maybe a contender for doing, or this is a song I would love to do, or this sort of thing. And then kind of having a bunch of those and then seeing what we wanted to do as a band. And sometimes it would be, well, this is, we think this could be a very good song, but maybe not right now, this moment, just start recording it. And then so there's still a lot of material. Also, there was some more recently written things that I had done, which I thought would be good to do. So it's a mix of recently written songs, and even with some collaborations with some other songwriters, as well as probably goes back, a couple of them about 25 years ago. And when people have sometimes told me which ones they think are the new and the old. No one's been right yet. So it all kind of fits and it all works together.
Well, one of the songs that I really loved on the record is a song called Big Car. And it's in that grand tradition.
That's one of the old ones.
It's one of the grand traditions of cars is sexual sort of innuendo, but it ends in death. I mean, it's could you tell me, do you remember writing that and sort of the impetus for that song?
Well, as I was interrupting you, just to put in, that's one of the older ones. And I can't... I don't recall exactly where it started, although I think there was a brief period of time where I had a Cadillac and an old one, so I was driving that around, and it's a big one. So that's probably where it started me thinking. But the song is not without controversy in our group, and I don't know if you care to talk about it or just stop. All right. I think that's a look. Go on.
I'll talk about anything.
Yeah. Well, I've wanted to do that song for a number of years, and we've had different people in the group, so we can put it on them. We'll put it on them, and that might be it. That we could never get a consensus of everybody in the group wanting to play the song. In fact, I've heard very much like no, because it's too upsetting lyrically. And I thought, you picked this one? This is the one you won't do? Really? And it's amazing to me. And then it's like, it's a story. It's like, yeah, it might not be to everybody's taste, but a lot of people like it. Anyway, so that's, so we finally, it's a huge achievement. I think we can do anything. We can even record Big Car.
Well, there was another part of the song, like an epilogue, that we cut out. That was the
was that
part
the?
that was kind of disturbing. Yeah.
You see, I think cutting
So it's
out
not
that
there.
part that we cut out, which now no one will ever know, I think that
They
made
don't
the
even know
song-
what we're talking about.
No,
The song is
you don't
the
need to know.
protagonist, because here's the thing: all songs are totally autobiographical.
Yeah, right. Right. Just yeah.
So I don't know. What, you're the
No,
journalist.
it's,
why don't you? Why don't
you don't have to-
I don't know. You don't like a good murder ballad? I mean, to me,
It's a fun murder ballad with a surprise at the end, and I don't. Except you don't know it's going to be a murder until the
sex,
very end.
death, passion. It's all very.
It's
close
got
to
it
the
all.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's but cutting out the part, I actually think made it more upsetting. You think it makes it less upsetting, so. Oh well.
Now they're all going to rush out and buy the album just so they can hear this controversial song.
And
That's our marketing strategy.
And there must be somewhere, because we played it live a couple of times, including the very controversial coda at the end that now has been taken out. There must be somebody somewhere that has a recording of that. So you can go find that. Ooh. I think it makes it way more upsetting.
Bootlegger.
No,
challenge.
less upsetting. That's it. I think it makes it less upsetting, and now it's more upsetting.
I don't know what it says about me that that's the song I was attracted to, so that's making me a little nervous as well. So
It's not good. It's not good. Yeah. But thank you. I'm glad there's a fan of that song.
yes, I love that song. You did write with other people for this record. Does that mean that was a relatively new experience for you?
I've written with other people, but in fact, we've written a couple of times, a couple songs on some prior Violent Femmes albums. But this was the first time where I was asked, would I be interested in writing with some other songwriters, and nobody that I had met before knew or anything. And just, okay, I'll get on a plane, I'll go fly, and I'm there making this trip to meet somebody to write a song. And that's what I did. And that had some very good results, and which is on the song Issues, which was just played here with a video. That's one of those collaborative songs.
I mean, were you afraid that working with somebody else would sort of flatten out the kind of quirky nature of your writing?
No, I wasn't. I didn't have any thoughts, and I don't have any fear about or anxiety about that. It was just, will this be able to work, and what will be the results, and how exactly to go about it. You know, how somebody else might work, and the way they do things, and the way what'll work with, you know, how I'm going to do stuff. But no, I didn't have that thought. I just thought it might not work at all.
Well, I really thought I love both issues and the title track. I can be anything, and they sort of both remind me of something that could be out of some '50s musical comedy. Had that Broadway comedy, and I saw that your father was involved in music theater, and I sort of wonder how that had an effect on you as a songwriter, and whether you were attracted to these songs for some of that reason.
I'm sure it's had an effect. My mother was on Broadway, actually, in a musical in the 50s, in the 1950s, not the not the location of the theater. It might have been, but a New York crowd here. And so, yeah, I grew up. I very dimly recall being one of the children in The King and I. That production wasn't the one on Broadway, but I with my my mother and father being the king and the queen, the king and Anna, if I recall the name right. Anyway, so I grew up with all musical stuff, a lot of 1960s and 1950s kind of musicals. So I'm sure that has to have had some influence on what I do. The song you mentioned that's on the album, I think of very much also as a children's song that's also enjoyable for adults.
Yeah. I was listening to Pandora, the Pandora app the other day. It's a app where makes a mixed playlist based on whatever band you choose. And I started wondering whether bands ever sort of Pandoraed themselves just to see.
I did it, yeah. It was a mistake.
And I was wondering,
It wasn't, you didn't like
did you
it?
agree? Did you disagree? But anyways, I Pandoraed you guys, and I came up with a list of songs that I came up with. And you can either thumbs up, thumbs down, or sideways, or make commentary. So
And?
Ramone's California Sun.
Oh,
that's cool.
There's not enough thumbs over here to go.
The Cure, Love Song.
I can see that. In the early days, I wouldn't have thought that they were similar to us, but I saw them play live recently, and it did occur to me that we probably appeal to some of the same psychological needs, even if the music isn't exactly similar.
It's emotionally vulnerable, you can say that. Social Distortion, When She Begins.
Don't get it, but yeah, they're good, but I don't get the connection.
I'll just do a couple more of these.
Sure.
Lou Reed, Walk on the Wild Side.
Well, we wouldn't even have the Femmes if not for Lou Reed and the other people in the Velvet Underground. That's probably our number one inspiration and influence if you just had to name one.
Right.
Endlessly creative people, all of them, and yeah, that's a wonderful thing to be associated with. And we knew Lou, and we knew all of them, right? Pretty much all the Velvet Underground. I actually recorded with the Velvet Underground.
Wow.
That was a great experience because Maureen Tucker, the drummer, was making a solo album, and then she says, "Oh yeah, I got this song," and it was in the studio, Sterling, Lou. This is before they reformed, and Sterling, Lou, Mo, and Cale, and Victor, our drummer, our original drummer, and I. So that was like, to me, that was like more important than the Beatles reforming. But it just passed completely unnoticed. People didn't really, it didn't.
The Velvet's reunion?
Well, that we did this
yeah.
recording.
Guys did the
And there's
recording.
one day actually,
Sorry.
I wasn't there.
when they actually reformed and started doing gigs, it got a lot of attention. But it's like.
That's great.
And Gordon just told us a really nice story about Lou yesterday.
I want to hear a nice
Why don't
Lou
you,
Reed story.
Well,
I'd love to hear
got
a
a
nice.
few, but one I was thinking of was "Walk on the Wild Side." You mentioned that, and when I first met Lou, was at a concert that we were doing in Germany, which is another interesting story with that. But and he came up to me and he knew who I was, and he even said about a song that I wrote called "Just Like My Father," which is not one that would be a very well-known one, but he said I really like that song.
I gave him that album.
Oh,
I remember
right.
giving it to him in Rome.
All right.
that's how he
and
knew
then in
about it,
Germany, he's telling me that he really likes that song. That's great. And then he says, "Do you know Walk on the Wild Side?" I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You want to sing it with me?" And I was like, "Yeah." So then, until the time when he's performing, I'm thinking, okay, I listened to that like all the time when I was 15. Every verse is about a different person and the things that happen to them. And I don't know what he's going to want me to sing. And this was pre having any of the technology, or at least I didn't, to be able to access and find out quick, like what the lyrics were. So I just kept trying to go over in my head and and it all worked out. It all worked out fine.
I remember hearing that. That was pretty good. And at that very same gig that Gordon's referring to, I taught Lou how to smoke a proper cigar. Because he was smoking these little cigarillos, and I said, have you ever tried one of these? And I gave him a Romeo and Juliet at Churchill, which is like about, it's a proper cigar. So he puts it in his mouth and lights it up, and then Bonnie Raitt, who was also on the gig, she came over and said, "Hey, Brian, do you have anything about that size I can put in my mouth?"
Oh, that Bonnie.
Yeah,
Incorrigible.
she's a fun girl.
And at the,
I'll just tell you really quick a very, very quick Lou Reed story that I have. So I was assigned by Guitar World magazine to talk to Lou about the first Velvet's record. And, he knew sort of what was going on, and we were going to call and talk to him about it and get on the phone with Lou and say, "Hey, Lou, Brad here, like, we're going to talk about the first, Velvet's record." And he says to me, "Well, Brad, do you really remember what you did 20 years ago?" And that was it. That was the end of the interview. But I love Lou too. So, that's part of the list that's on Pandora. There were some other weird things like Rancid and Modern English and Kansas. No, I'm kidding.
It's all rock music, and that's not what we're about.
Yeah. So
if we
what would
programmed our own Pandora channel, it would include a lot of American roots music, such as we love blues, country music, bluegrass, jazz. We improvise a lot, so even though we don't sound like jazz, we have that kind of mentality. We probably relate to that more than we relate to most of the rock music that people might want to, categorize us in with. We love rock and roll too, but it's not the only thing that we're into.
one of the groups that we talked a lot about at Velvet Underground, the impact with us, maybe the second one, maybe that was all agreed in the group, or the most excitement was Sun Ra. So that's, that would be an example of what a lot of people wouldn't think of, or a lot of people wouldn't even know about if you're not in that world of that kind of jazz.
Yeah. No, it's funny to think that anybody would think that just because you play a certain kind of music that you wouldn't appreciate something else.
And be inspired by, not just appreciate it, but actually get fed from it.
You wrote a song called American Music, great song. And I was sort of wondering what in your mind how you would define that. What is American music to you? Why and what makes it special?
I think what's going to be a good answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about time. How long have we been doing this? But this is all right. I remember when I wrote that song, and I remember thinking I really like American music because I was looking at it was a double, triple, or maybe quadruple vinyl album collection. I think I got out of a library, or it might have been at some just on the street somewhere, and it was called American Music. And in it, it had early Johnny Cash. It also had John Cage, and it had like the most experimental, unusual music and jazz, as well as rootsy, bluesy, and folk, and as I mentioned, Johnny Cash or Hank Williams, and it just was this range of stuff that I grew up with, and also that I combined with what I was just discovering and being inspired by, as well as the stuff I grew up with and still am inspired by. So it was like all in this collection called American Music. And that's when I just started thinking, I like American music. And I just started, strumming those simple chords and just starting the song. So that's exactly, it was just like looking at that album collection.
I mean, did you ever get into like the Harry Smith anthology and all that?
Yeah,
I still think I will
right?
sometime, but later, I mean, I've heard different things here and there, but not like in a systematic way of really like, I'm just in that world.
Because it's sort of fun. I mean, in a way, what you guys do remind me a lot of what's on that, because it's just strange snapshots of American life, back in sort of the dusty past, but just really weird, quirky lyrics, and I had that out the other day, and I'm thinking, the Femmes would be fine on this. One of their songs would really work on this. I find that people's definitions of America are often sort of rooted also in their childhood. And I was wondering, who was the weirdest neighbor that you ever had when you were growing up? Do you remember any strange person in your... No? I'm surprising you?
They were all strange. I don't know. It's a difficult question. You've stumped us.
Well, for instance, next door to my house, there was a woman that built she's passed away now, so I think I can talk to her. But she built a rabbit hutch and kept a rabbit in it for a while, but then afterwards the rabbit disappeared and she started sleeping in it. On hot nights, I mean, it was... And her son was later decapitated in a snowmobile, an unfortunate snowmobile accident. So I don't know. Did you have any...
No, I'm not going to try to top that.
All wholesome? Okay.
Okay, you win that round.
So now we know what America really means.
Applause, yes.
Sleeping in a rabbit
Very good.
hutch.
I don't know who's
to
keeping
me, that's
score.
America. That's America. I don't know. You guys did something I think very difficult to do. You ushered in almost a whole new archetype for rock and roll or for popular music, which was this outsider character that had no interest in being a hero, that just wanted to do their own thing, whatever that was. And in fact, almost seemed to have contempt for anybody who did aspire to being cool or being the hero. And I wonder how you sort of got the courage to embrace your own weirdness.
Is he asking
He's
you?
talking to you.
No, yeah.
I'm asking both of you guys.
Well, okay. I think we're going to have a similar. If being forced to give a response, we'll have the same kind of response. I'm guessing. We'll see. Is that there was never any question or any hesitation or anything in my mind about embracing, this sort of thing that you're talking. I think you used the word weirdness. Did you or something? Whatever was the word, it just whatever that is, personality or a different way of thinking than most people maybe, or in certain ways. There was never for me any time of thinking, I don't know if I can, be me. It never felt like that. And also, I know my family life was always, from my parents and then also siblings, was always very supportive of, just wherever my interests were going or whatever, things were happening. Certainly, being creative and being interested in the arts or whatever. So it was, and then even with, other things, I think that sometimes there had to be a certain defiance, though, definitely. But I felt like if I had any hesitation, I don't really recall it right now. I always felt pretty much like, but there probably would have naturally been some moment of hesitation before certain acts of defiance, but I don't recall them now.
Yeah, I was fearless. I
Yeah,
didn't care
that's
what
right.
anybody thought or whether they liked me or my ideas or the music that we were making. That just doesn't matter. You just, if you really have the bug for music, especially, or any kind of creativity, then you have to be fearless. And a lot of people say, "Oh, musicians are egotists, they're egomaniacs," and it's true. But you have to be, because there's going to be a lot of people trying to discourage you. You have to be strong.
Yeah. I mean, even the name itself, whatever, Violent Femmes, I mean, it could be the Savage Wimps or whatever. I mean, that kind of thing, to me, is sort of gutsy. I don't recall anybody, you had punk rockers out there at the time, but even to some degree that was, aggressive. It had like a macho sort of thing to it, an aggressiveness. But the Violent Femmes, you guys put it out there and you did it with acoustic instruments. It was sort of uncompromising in your, sort of whim.
It was definitely uncompromising. Like, for example, the first album, we made it, we made some demos, we sent them around to maybe 50 or 60 record labels. Nobody was interested, so we went ahead and made the album. And then we sent that around again, and still nobody was interested, except there was one label who said, "The songs are good, but this music, that's not the way it should be. But if you re-record the songs with keyboards and with drum machine," and they wanted us to change, and we could have signed with a major label like that, but we were uncompromising, as you said. But now, if we had made the record that way, or remade it, I don't think anybody would want to listen to it, probably, nowadays. Whereas they're still listening to the first album the way we wanted it to be.
Right.
Because we could see into the future and realize that that kind of music wasn't necessarily of the time. At that time, it wasn't of any time, still not, but it's still valid.
Were the successes of songs like Blister and The Sun and added up, I mean, do you still see those as blessings or curses? I mean, these songs that have stayed around so long, do you feel defined by those?
Blessings, absolutely, not a curse.
Yeah. I just read something recently that J.K. Rowling discovered the first Femmes record and had never heard it, and completely fell in love with it. And she's out there singing your praises. How do you respond to that? I mean,
I see your mouth moving, but
Yeah,
nothing's
yeah.
coming out.
I mean,
It seems,
what? I mean,
seems pretty normal. People are constantly discovering us. Our first album was platinum before it ever entered the Billboard charts, and that's just because of word of mouth, people telling each other about it. And there's always new people. It's amazing we look out into the crowd and see 15, 16, even 12-year-old kids knowing all the words, and they're still discovering it, or even a mature writer like her, but they still have the same reaction because it's so honest and direct.
There's a little more detail to that, though, because I think at first, as I recall, because I was like, basically, you got to read this or see this. At first, she hated it, but then very quickly she decided, no, actually, she loves it. So there you go. That's a little more. Maybe, and actually, I think it was just me, that she didn't know my voice or something.
Yeah. Just circle back for a minute, back to the record. There's a really great, sweet song on this record called "What You Really Mean," and it was written by your sister.
My oldest sister, Cynthia. Yeah.
How did that find its way onto the record?
Well, I've loved that song ever since I heard it, and she put it out on a cassette tape and maybe a CD at some point many years ago. And there have been a couple of times where I tried to get somebody to record it, and it never worked out. Like I would say, hear this song. Maybe you should do this song. And then I thought this time we're going to be recording, and I thought, well, I guess I should do it. I just love this song. So I passed it off as a Gano composition, because it is, until it came time to write the credits and everything, and then it's like, okay, no, it's really. I had more than one person tell me, this is your best song. And I said, thank you very much. And I was like, on behalf of my sister, well, my whole family thanks you. And I agree with you. I'd like, yeah, you're right. That is the best one. But that's, my sister Cynthia wrote that.
Brian, because I am a guitar nerd. Always thought your bass playing was amazing, and the sound is so visceral and strong and interesting. How did you first decide that you were going to play bass using the acoustic instrument that you use? And it sort of, after hearing it on the record, makes me think, why don't more people do this? Because it's such a great sound.
They don't because they can't. It takes a lot of technique to play that thing. It's a lot harder than it looks like. But it came out of the same love of folk music and jazz. And I didn't want to play the upright bass because I didn't have a car, so I wanted something that I could carry around. So I play the acoustic bass guitar, and it was a good move because it has a distinct sound that's instantly recognizable. But when Victor and I hooked up with Gordon, it became apparent that because of the quality of the storytelling and the lyrics, that it's a shame with a lot of rock music is that there may be great lyrics, but you can't really hear them anyway because the music is deafening and raucous. So we thought if we would underplay, and that goes also to Victor was using brushes, and we still use brushes now, and that would put the focus on what Gordon was doing with the words. So that's like more the storytelling aspect of it, and that's the reason why you're asking so many questions about the words, because you can actually hear them.
Yeah.
And that was part of the plan from the beginning. It was to rock, play rock and roll music, but with the sensitivity of jazz or folk music.
So what's next? Are you guys gonna do you think you're gonna record more? Are you gonna keep
We are recording. We recorded some stuff this afternoon. We recorded something yesterday, and hopefully there will be more releases, and certainly will be at least a few more releases because they're already in the can.
Cool. Cool. I think we're going to take some questions from the audience.
So from the success of your first album, you then went to Hello Ground with your second album. And from that, it's all B-sides, according to what I read online. what can we expect after We Can Do Anything and the next generation of music coming out from the Femmes and the B-sides and some of that original folk music, leaning back towards Black Girls and Never Tell and Country Death Song? What can we expect?
Wow.
That guy knows a lot of stuff.
That's a knowledgeable and somewhat bewildering question.
Yeah, because I have no idea. But to answer your question, I don't know. We'll do some more songs and then let people decide, what they feel about them or how they feel about them.
The interesting thing about your question is you talked about the first album and then you talked about Hallowed Ground. But we actually had all that material in the beginning. And we could have made Hallowed Ground first and put out the first, so-called first album second if we wanted to. We could have made a double album with all that stuff. But we chose to focus on the pop side of things for the first album. And then we made the suicidal decision to, I guess, confuse the audience and the industry with subsequent releases rather than sticking with the game plan. But we thought that was punk, or we thought that was just being creative. So we knew when we made some of the less immediately accessible albums, we knew what we were doing. We knew that it was going to have that effect. But I think that's probably part of being an artist, is that you try to defy people's expectations.
Hey, so since the beginning, since you started, has your approach to music, making music, or the style of your music changed? Did you feel any pressure with the taste in music changing since, from when you first made your album?
Well, I could answer for myself and see if it's anything different. Is that no pressure based on anything of what else is going on. There never was, and there still isn't. I don't even. There was at some point a question was raised about even internally the pressure, like related to how much so many people love our first album, or people that might like our Hallowed Ground, our second album, or other things where, when we go into the studio after years of not recording, is there any pressure even related to our own selves? And for me, no, none. That's just, I'd never even think of such a thing. So I don't feel any pressures related to that. And I think there was another part to your question, which I'm forgetting now, but you can say.
Wasn't it talking about whether we react to the environment around us? No.
Just like the taste in music, like nowadays, like if the way,
I know what it was, because I felt, and is anything changed for us? I think you had also asked that, or I was thinking that,
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, nodding in the front. Thank you, sir. He's like, because, you're like, yes, he did ask you. Absolutely no change at all. This new album for us, most of the tracks, not everyone, but most of them are recorded just the exact way that we did our first album, and actually most of also Hallowed Ground, our second album. So it really hasn't changed for us.
But there have been a lot of things that changed in the industry, and that's a challenge not only for us, but for any musician. In a sense, it used to be that we were expected to make new albums, and there was absolutely a strong incentive to do that because you could sell them. You could make money off of it, and it was a good way to make a living. That's not possible with making records anymore. So if you want to make a record, you have to do it because you have something to say, and you want to do it with a certain style, and it actually is liberating not to think about, I wonder if people are going to like this, or I wonder, because it doesn't make any difference if they like it or don't like it. It's going to mainly get around by word of mouth and just maybe people looking at their computers or something like that. So you do it because you have something to say.
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi. I saw your what was billed as your farewell show that was at the Mohegan Sun Wolf Den.
It was for a while, wasn't it? It was for a few years. Yeah, I mean, it's
I thought there's...
it wasn't farewell forever. It was just farewell for a few years. It's
Fare thee well, maybe.
Yeah.
was a great show. And then a bunch of years went by, and all of a sudden you were back on tour with the Bare Naked Ladies and Colin Hay. What was that like for you guys to get back in front of audiences like that?
Well, we had been playing for, I think, a year and a half or so before we went on. That particular tour just came about because Bare Naked Ladies are huge Violent Femmes fans. In fact, I think they named one of their albums Gordon, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
I'm on the list of their favorite Gordons. So there's a lot of them, but I'm one of them.
so they just invited us to come on tour, and we said, sure, why not? But yeah, playing the music's never been a problem, and we've always enjoyed that. I think we're enjoying it probably more consistently now than we maybe ever did. It's a lot of fun.
Okay, guys, thanks for hanging out with us today, and go out and get this record. We can do anything. It's a fantastic record. So much fun. Great songs.
Thanks,
Looking
man.
forward to more.
Thank
you very much.
And thank you all for being here.